Okay, so I share with a couple of my colleagues some of the big ones, but certainly given sort of Congress's role, I'm spending a lot of time in what everybody's been calling the green paper, the privacy green paper, and I'm also pretty active in cybersecurity activities going on at the Commerce Department. So both of those, in a theoretical sense and in a gotta have a lot of work to do sense, have been keeping me up at night. I'm also very concerned in really taking a whole new perspective when working on cross-border data flows and relationships, given the trade relationship and the role that Commerce has, dealing with those, both in trying to understand and work internally on the improved safe harbor program and just understanding the way that all the laws and the nuanced details work, given our role in all the trade negotiations. Some other things, what I'll say, are a little closer to more grounded items that I'm getting more involved in. There's quite a major discussion going on in cloud computing, and standards in cloud computing. There's a lot going on in our just standards, working general security standards, and sort of working the privacy discussion into that in a more concrete and material way. And also authentication. It's a real major issue. I'm glad to see that the department's taking a pretty aggressive role in pushing much more clear standards, much more useful information out there in partnering, but it's a lot of work. And so I'm teamed up a lot with the folks who are implementing the national strategy for trusted identities in cyberspace. It's been pretty interesting so far. So those are just some of the handful of issues that keep me really busy.
It's a good issue. So take this moment, and we're definitely going to open up to questions. Take this moment to brag a little. Tell us about a big win, as we say, what's a big win you had, or a hard issue that you think went the right way, or that you think you made an impact on that, but for your presence, would have gone a different direction. That's a tough one. I should give you a few more minutes. I'm going to stall verbally while you guys think about something. There was a time I used the inappropriate language with one of the secretaries that I worked for. That probably was not my finest moment, but I'm still very proud in describing some initiative as full of something. But that's probably not a win so much as an inappropriate comment. What do you think? Programs that went a little different or that you all had an impact on in your time?
Okay, so I'll go. I haven't been to Commerce yet to have a big win. In my time in Social Security, there were many big wins and there were many small wins. One of the best big wins I had was, in the time that I was there, was the time that Social Security really moved from a hardcore, we generate more paper than anyone on earth agency to, an agency that was moving very aggressively into the internet space and doing a lot more. And it was always very difficult to get people to really understand that it was not necessarily the best way just to take the paper process as it was translated onto the computer, whether it was just fill out the same form. So there were many times that, we would have these heated battles about terms on forms, questions being asked on forms, and they all sound kind of esoteric, and you're like, that's not much of a big win. But one of the biggest ones that I was fighting was on a very complicated authentication process by which is used thousands of times. In the paper world, you filled out a form. It was a really simple form. But replicating that process into the online environment was going to be incredibly complicated. And as many folks are wont to do, they were looking for a quick fix to a very complicated thing that was going to be very costly. And they kept explaining that when you were moving down the road of providing online access to that kind of medical information and that type of financial information really did need to be specific role-based access. And you actually had to develop a model to do that. And it was, me, the chief privacy officer, versus the world, the finance people, budget people. And in essence, by explaining it and really, holding to the ground, I actually was able to persuade the commissioner, who was the only person who really wanted to be persuaded in, that was, although more costly, although more expensive, and although much more difficult to implement, the right path to go. And it was, very sound discussion based on facts, explaining the differences, the risks, So, kind of pulling, you were talking about before, Doug, some multidisciplinary aspects of it. It was really pointing to all of them. A little bit of the law, a little bit of the technology, a little bit of the risk management and compliance, a little bit of the, this will look really bad on the front page of the paper, or really weird when you're trying to answer questions about it on the Hill. It was a little bit of all of that mixed together, but that was definitely my biggest win. The program, the disability program, the Social Security Administration is 54 million people, so we made a difference in that.
I'll mention one based in compliance and then maybe one based in policy. The compliance one is the privacy impact assessment tool is a very powerful tool for the privacy office to use. And it can help bring some discipline and rigor to systems that people are thinking about. And in particular, it gave us really a big win in, there was a legislative initiative called the Nationwide Suspicious Activity Reporting Initiative, NSI. It's also sometimes called Suspicious Activity Reporting, or SARS. In setting up that system in the department, it brought privacy in at creation of that system, and before it could even be implemented or put into place, it had to meet the privacy impact assessment, the formula that forces a program manager to think about what information is being collected, and that brings to bear all of the fair information practice principles down the line. So you have to do what is your authority for collecting it, what's relevant and necessary, data minimization, retention, security, and down the line it really put a very precise and limited point of collection on this information and how it was going to be used and how it was going to be retained. And it imposed training requirements on the analysts who would touch that data. And it gave us regular powers to do oversight. So I think looking at that PIA, and it is public, all of our PIAs that are not national security systems are public. You can go and look at it, and that was very much seen as a good, strong win for the privacy office. And I'll just take a second and mention what I would consider to be a win on the policy side, is the privacy office does impose department-wide policies, and one of the ones that we did, this is some years back, but we call it the mixed systems policy, which is basically taking OMB guidance from 1975 and saying that if you have a system that both includes U.S. persons and non-U.S. persons, agencies are encouraged to implement their Privacy Act systems as if they're all covered, because under the Privacy Act, the technical definition is the person is only going to be covered if they're a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident. Well, we extended that coverage to all individuals. So visitors to the United States had, at an administrative level, those same protections that covered U.S. persons did. And we felt that that was a strong message to the rest of the traveling public, the international traveling public, that your information is going to have this full policy commitment of protection and privacy protection. So I'll pass it on to Douglas.
Thank you. It's interesting to think about what would be a big win, because sometimes it's a win if you stop something, and it might be something that you wouldn't want to admit that somebody thought of. And sometimes it's a win when something potentially bad doesn't happen. There was a big rash of lawsuits for a variety of reasons last year, and none of them were us. Now, I don't know if that's because of our guidance. I don't know if it's because of my lucky socks, the feng shui in my office. I don't know. And there's no way to really know. So I don't know if it's a win or not, but I'm going to take credit for it. We think that our guidance has been forward-looking. But the big thing that we've done recently that I am particularly proud of is earlier this year we completely rejiggered and relaunched our privacy policy after a gigantic reset. And the reason I'm happy about it, everybody does a privacy policy, but we went through this long process of sort of figuring out what makes sense for the business, what's forward-looking, how are we incorporating all the new things in the way of layered notice and enhanced notice and improved access to opt-outs and things like that. But the reason I'm proud of mentioning it here is we were able to do this with an entirely new executive team. And so it was an opportunity to go and sell all these people on why privacy is worth doing, and really move beyond just being an honest broker into there's value to doing this right. And that gave us an entree into getting sort of privacy into discussions. It gave us an entree into, now that's launched, we can do and are embarked upon a training and awareness campaign that gives you the entree to set up the kind of auditing and monitoring that makes it responsible. So doing that in a new executive regime is something that we're pretty happy about.
I'm going to do one more, Brian, shake it up, and then think about your questions. We need to get some energy in this room by late today, but think of questions and ask it of somebody else on the panel. I know they're all going to ask me questions, so I'm setting myself up for this one. But what's something you want to ask another privacy officer, even if it's for advice on a project or something you've been dying to know or something on your mind? Go ahead, John.
Kind of a very general one, but I'm interested in what everybody's views are on what do you think the future is of the privacy profession? Where do you see the CPO role going? Start with Nuala.
Only up, I'll tell you, I'm reminded of a comment someone very in my family once said, you're going to have to broaden your scope. It's really kind of a narrow focus. It's not going to last very long. This was about 15 years ago, so that didn't, and a mentor of mine who did privacy saying, you really need to do privacy plus something else, and I've done only privacy now in the last 5 jobs, and it's working well for me so far. But I do think as we all become, as many organizations are global and increasingly purely digital or heavily digital, these issues are only going to become exponentially more essential to the policy debate at the highest levels of the company. I mean, they are essential for companies that are purely online plays, but even more, any organization, private or public sector, that traffics in information, even for something as mundane as paying your own employees, needs to be cognizant of the regulatory environment. I'm having a somewhat of a surreal day in that I started this morning at 8 o'clock this morning at the Chamber of Commerce, and that couldn't be any more of a different crowd, talking about information flows and the commercial bottom line and what that means and that sort of thing. But the fact that the commercial side, the purely corporate side, is really getting this as a policy issue, and I think even understands that it is not purely just an IT or legal or data issue, that it's a human rights issue, that it's a global policy discussion, and that there are very, very valid individual concerns about dignity and respect for your customers, your suppliers, your vendors, your partners, and that how you treat their data is how you are treating them. I think that the debate is only going to get more interesting, and that people who do privacy or information policy generally are in a very well positioned to lead that debate. And for whatever side you're coming from, in your current space or iteration and in this discussion, it is a great time with the right to be forgotten versus the First Amendment versus, it's just a terrific time to be having these conversations. So, and I think they do have a real impact on government operations and the private sector.